Continuing on with chapter 9, page 237. I know there's a lot of notes with chapter 9, but the AP curriculum has added more info about soil than they used to have, but then they've taken it out of some of the other areas. So it's not any more you have to know, it's just more in this chapter and less in another. Okay, so here is a figure and caption reviewing the process of eutrophication. We're actually showing you more of what happens with the farms. So this is page 237, and when you have inorganic fertilizer, so man-made fertilizer, a lot of man-made fertilizer, so it's nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process that we studied when we studied the nitrogen cycle. Inorganic is more likely to be washed into rivers and streams to cause eutrophication. It can also go underground and cause nitrate pollution underground, which is not good because nitrates in drinking water can cause something called blue baby syndrome, and we'll learn that later on as well. It can also cause air pollution, so the nitrogen can go airborne and cause nitrogen oxides. So ironically, in a lot of our farming areas like California's Central Valley, like near Fresno, has actually terrible air pollution. It's farmland. You would think farmland is nice and fresh and clean, and it's not. They have really bad air pollution from farming. They also have water pollution from farming. And then you have the runoff for eutrophication. Now, manure, animal manure can run off, so that's a natural fertilizer. It can run off, but it's less likely to, unless you have a feedlot with just tons of animals that have huge amounts of poop that get washed. But most of the time, if you are fertilizing with natural sources like compost, which we wrote about on the last video here, these organic fertilizers are less likely to cause eutrophication. They still can, but they're less likely. Health risks of fertilizer in our drinking or groundwater. So if this goes underground and people use this as their drinking water, so they pump it out, and cities like in Santa Clarita, half our drinking water comes from underground. Now we don't have farm pollution in our aquifers, fortunately, but you can live in a city and you still are drinking groundwater. And then in Santa Clarita, half of our drinking water comes from an aqueduct, which is melted snowpack up in Northern California. They send it to us in the California aqueduct. But if you have fertilizer, especially nitrates in your drinking water, it can cause blue baby disease. It's where the nitrates attach to the hemoglobin in the blood instead of oxygen, and so your cells aren't getting oxygen. So it happens really more to babies because their bodies are younger and smaller, and so they don't turn blue like a Smurf. They just have a slight blue tinge to their skin. And then phosphates in drinking water from fertilizer can cause cancer. So we don't want fertilizer in our drinking water at all. Okay. So let's talk about 238 and subsidies for farming. So we provide in the United States a huge amount of subsidies for farmers. We pay them sometimes not to grow crops on highly erodible cropland, but we also give them guaranteed prices for growing things like corn and soy, etc. So it is not open to the free market. So what are the benefits of, then this is our taxpayer money. This is our money that we're giving to farmers for free as they grow some crops. So it's guaranteed income against a bad crop year. So if hail or locusts or a hurricane or whatever damages your crops, then just for planting them in the ground, you're going to get money from the government. It takes highly erodible cropland out of production. So if you own some land that's super erodible, they'll pay you not to grow crops on that land. And so that prevents things like dust bowls and air pollution and things like that. The problem is that it supports farms that degrade soil. So if you're a farmer and you're getting paid for a huge monoculture of soy or corn, and It's not great for the soil. It causes degradation. It's not good for the water, but you're getting paid for that crop grown in that way. There's not an economic incentive to stop that process. It also makes unhealthy food cheap, like corn syrup and beef. Your In-N-Out meal is cheaper than it actually should be in the free market. So in our capitalist system, this is not capitalism at work. Your In-N-Out burger, the beef was partially subsidized because we feed most of our beef corn, and corn is heavily subsidized by the government if you grow corn. We also turn corn into corn syrup, which is your soda. So all of your sodas are actually cheaper than they should be. If we paid the market price for the corn and that corn that then fed the beef, our beef would be more expensive and our sodas would be more expensive. So now you're thinking, well, it's great, let's subsidize them. But are we subsidizing healthy foods, or are we making unhealthy foods cheaper? And so we have kind of a national crisis in nutrition. And so these are things to think about and to consider as you become an adult and a voter. So there are pros and there are cons to farm subsidies. Okay, so this is optional. So these are things that you used to have to know these specifics for the AP test, but I put optional because you can still use this information to answer an FRQ, but they will not ask you about it for a multiple choice. I hope that makes sense. So even if they won't ask you about these things on a multiple choice, if you still know about the Swamplands Act or the Wetlands Reserve Program, you can use that information if it's applicable to answer a question on an FRQ. So that's why I put optional. And that's it for chapter 9.